Welcome to Retail's Most Wanted, the show that examines the latest issues related to organized retail crime and how retailers and policymakers are fighting back against today's organized crime syndicates. I'm your host, Marty Carpenter. Coming up on today's show, a really good one. We're going to go in depth with the FBI, specifically an agent on their major thefts team. That's all coming up next, but first, this message from our sponsors. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with the Attorney General Alliance, where U.S. State Attorneys General collaborate on emerging legal issues and the rule of law at home and across borders. Learn more at agalliance.com. Retail's Most Wanted is brought to you in partnership with LVT, securing physical environments through intelligent automation. Learn more at lvt.com. That's lvt.com. Our guest today is Doug McElway. He's a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Can you describe for our audience the role of the FBI's major thefts team in combating organized retail crime?
Yeah, so it's something that maybe sounds a little bit different, but it's something that the FBI has been doing for a long time. We view organized retail crime and theft crimes as organized crime, which is something that the FBI has a long history of investigating and something that we take a lot of pride in being very good at. And so we view ourselves as a leader in this area, and we work closely with our local law enforcement partners, our other federal partners as well, and we try to go after the worst of the worst offenders in the retail and theft industry. And so a lot of times that means working with the private sector partners who have been very valuable to us. We're learning a ton about the nuances associated with these types of crimes from our partners there. And we try and take these cases from the very the most egregious offenders and the leaders of these organizations all the way down to the runners on the street level and try and dismantle the entire organization, preferably all at once. And so that's really our main role here is working the entire organization across the country and overseas if it leads there, and dismantling them completely.
A lot of what the general public sees when it comes to organized retail crime, or the images that are conjured up for them, are, the smash and grab. People run in, kind of loot a store and run out. But it seems like it's getting more and more bold in the approach. Like you start to see cargo theft, right? So I'm wondering, how significant is the issue now when it comes to supply chain disruption and cargo theft in the context of organized retail crime?
Yeah, cargo theft is really an area we're focusing a lot of our resources across the Bureau when it comes to major theft. And in 2022, the National Retail Federation put out their numbers, and it was $112 billion in shrink that year. And we've kind of narrowed that down or zoomed in on that and seen that when you look at outside theft, about 37% of that 112 billion is outside theft. And when you look at the outside theft, about 58% of that is from cargo theft. And so it's a big chunk of the outside theft. And so that's one of the reasons that we're focusing our efforts there. The investigations are usually long and complex because the criminals are good at what they do. But yeah, the cargo theft is a huge problem in this space and something that we're really trying to combat.
Can you help me just on defining a few terms there? When you say outside theft, so you had a big number, a number in the billions.
112 billion.
112 billion, and 37% of that you said is outside theft. What is outside theft?
That would be any theft that is not any shrink that's not related to employees, stealing. Gotcha. Or lost goods that are damaged in transit or returned or delivered to the wrong address. Any other kind of shrink that could be in that equation.
So a very large number for the overall shrink. A large chunk of that is happening outside, and then a large portion of that is happening before it even gets out of the cargo. Is that Am I following along the right way?
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. And then so we've got that 58%, which is cargo theft, and I think about 38% is in-store theft. So those smash and grabs or any other kind of you know, more typical theft that you might see on TV regularly. That we estimate that to be about 28%. So it's a big, the cargo theft is a big portion of this shrink.
Can you tell me anything about the strategies the FBI employs to prevent or combat that type of theft?
Yeah, a big, it's not rocket science really. A huge part of it is just partnerships. The criminals involved in cargo theft know the vulnerabilities of our country. They know the vulnerabilities of the supply chain. And part of that is just local law enforcement and federal law enforcement don't necessarily talk to each other on a regular basis about these types of crimes because at first they appear kind of run of the mill, lower level um, state, local crimes. But when you put the pieces together, which is where we generally try to come in, we see that these are highly orchestrated, very complex, and wide-ranging criminal organized crime groups. And so our strategies are really increasing communication and building partnerships with our local law enforcement partners and our partners within the retail industry as well. We spend a lot of time speaking at conferences and raising awareness within the industry about the FBI's role in organized crime relating to theft. And so we really try to keep those communications open and focused on the worst of the worst offenders.
So there's some challenges between federal and state and just coordinating there. How does the international nature of organized retail crime pose challenges to your investigative efforts?
Yeah, there's several challenges there, and that's something that we're noticing more and more is the international nexus to these organized retail crimes. So there's several factors there. One is the criminals themselves. We're seeing a lot of criminals um, coming into the United States for the sole purpose of committing crime. We've kind of called it crime tourism. We're seeing groups from South America come into the U.S. and literally we've tracked them from Miami all the way up to Alaska, committing burglaries of residences and retail organizations all along the way. Um, we also see criminals who are infiltrating the supply chain from overseas. A lot of international actors have become very good at cyber-enabled fraud, and that's a large chunk of the cargo theft is committed through cyber-enabled fraud. So, and many of those actors are overseas.
That's
And then lastly, I'm
no,
sorry.
I was going to say that's just crazy to think of the scope of it. Go ahead.
Oh, it really is. Yeah, it's staggering. And then finally, I was just going to say that the overseas, there's the market for stolen goods has just really increased. Um, we're seeing a lot of stolen cargo just shipped directly overseas to where we've a lot of our investigations are leading back to pretty large logistical companies that seem legitimate, but their sole purpose is importing stolen American goods and selling them in foreign countries. And so it's much easier for criminals to sell what they steal now.
When I think people think about, I mentioned everyone seems to picture the looting of a store and they think, okay, that's exactly what organized retail crime is, not understanding that it's something bigger than that. But a lot of those videos, it seems like every time I see one, it's California. It happens in California. But are there specific regions or even other countries that are having problems with organized retail crime? Is it more prevalent in some parts of the U.S. than others? And then are there other countries having the same kind of problems that we're having?
Yeah, that's a great question. As far as other countries experiencing the same problems, I am aware of other countries where, some of these groups that come from South America and do this crime tourism that I was talking about, we call them South American theft groups. And there are several other countries that have tracked the same groups committing the same types of crimes in other countries. I know that Canada and France have both reached out to the FBI recently about looking for assistance in those types of investigations. Um, and then as far as regions within the United States, it happens everywhere. And part of part of the challenge we face there is that the groups will hop from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. They do their homework ahead of time. Uh, the South American theft groups in particular have people that are members of those groups, which are highly organized. They do intelligence reports before they go out and steal to identify where the police boundaries are in those jurisdictions, and they're careful not to hit within those jurisdictions more than once. But it really happens all over the country. I mean, of course, in the major cities, we do see it more often, but we have cases all over the country.
What kind of collaboration and coordination is there between the FBI and, I mean, you mentioned you've had Canada and France reach out, but uh, how generally are those relationships, right? Like, what kind of coordination happens between the FBI and any other country when it comes to enforcement agencies tackling organized retail crime?
Well, it's a big part of what we do. It's our foreign partners are incredibly valuable, and we have agents and intel analysts who are attachés in most of our embassies overseas, and they have great relationships with their foreign counterparts, the law enforcement in those countries, and we're reaching out to them constantly on these types of cases, and so they're very valuable partnerships. They Of course, we don't have jurisdiction overseas, and so if we're trying to recover stolen goods or if we're trying to identify criminals that are located overseas, we're completely reliant on those foreign partners, and in most cases, they're very helpful.
What can a retailer even do to protect itself against organized retail crime when you're talking about cargo theft or supply chain disruption? Like if you're running a store or even a large chain of stores across the country and your stuff is being stolen off of trains or as soon as it's unloaded from a ship, like what can a retailer do? What's proven successful, or what do you wish they were doing to help prevent this?
I think the biggest vulnerability that we see is, um, through cyber-enabled fraud, like I talked about. When it comes to That's a huge vulnerability when it comes to cargo theft. We used to see traditional cargo theft was more the what you mentioned, where the trailers are getting broken into at a truck stop, or containers getting stolen at a port while it's waiting to be shipped somewhere else. Those still happen, but they're not nearly as frequent as the load board intrusions, where companies mistakenly book loads on a load board to someone that is claiming to be a legitimate truck driver, but they're not, and they take that load and deliver it to somewhere it wasn't supposed to go. And by the time the large box retailer understands what's happened, that shipment has
Mm,
been gone, is gone, and a lot of times sent back overseas for sale on the gray market.
yeah, it's really interesting. So maybe just having a better process in place helps prevent that, or training with
Yeah,
personnel to make sure they know, hey, this is stuff that happens, and we've got to make sure that it doesn't.
I think just vetting the people that they're contracting their loads to, and who they're doing business with, making a more stringent process on um, vetting the people that they're hiring these loads to. It takes more time, and it can delay the shipping process, which is not always good for making money, but it definitely ensures or helps to ensure the products are delivered to where they're supposed to go. So
You,
yeah, I think training the employees is just a huge part of this.
yeah, they're sort of that first line of defense. It sounds like you've
Right.
been working and fighting against organized retail crime for a number of years. I'm wondering if you could give us some perspective just from what you've noticed. What changes have you noticed in organized retail crime in recent years? Is there reason for optimism that we're kind of getting ahead of this, or is it always just kind of this ongoing cat and mouse game?
No, I think that we've had some really big successes recently. Our agents out of the Dallas office had a huge case that was just adjudicated recently, and it gives me a lot of hope. So what happened in that deal? AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon stores in the Dallas area were getting robbed at a pretty alarming rate. And as the investigators began to work that case, they realized that all these robbers were taking the stolen Apple products to a fence in the area, and all those Apple devices were getting shipped overseas and sold in various countries, other foreign countries. And so the FBI, a bunch of other federal law enforcement worked together and were able to indict 101 people in that conspiracy. And to date, there have been almost zero robberies of those cell phone stores since that case was taken down and those arrests were made. So, things like that give me a lot of optimism. There are some alarming trends in the amount of cargo theft that we see through cyber-enabled fraud, as well as the brazenness of some of the retail store burglaries and robberies that you talked about that we see on the news regularly. But if we can make more cases like the one I talked about in Dallas, I think we're going to be in better shape.
It's nice to hear that there are successes out there, because so often you just see the crime happening and sort of hope or presume that something's being done about it and that we're making some headway there. I'll get you out of here on this. I just wonder if you could tell me what would you want people to know about the FBI's efforts in combating organized retail crime? If they're taking one message away from this to say, I feel confident in what the FBI is doing and how they're working with local and law enforcement, for example, what's the one message you want people to take away?
I think that we're thorough and that we do an excellent job, that our goals are to dismantle the entire organization, which, as I just talked about in Dallas, we did really well there. I would also say that we ask for our partners, especially in the private sector, to be patient with us, because it does take a long time to put those types of investigations together. We're not who you should be calling if you want your goods recovered overnight. We generally are not first responders, so federal investigations take a while, but when they're complete, the results are excellent, and we really can help make a long-lasting impact in this space.
Doug McElway is a supervisory special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Doug, thanks so much for your work fighting back against organized retail crime, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Retail's Most Wanted. Thanks to our presenting sponsors, LVT and the Attorney General Alliance. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button so you can catch each new episode. We drop one every 2 weeks. We're also on X, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. You can find links for all of those accounts in the show notes below. Thanks for being with us, and keep up the good fight.